8 billion people. Satellites circling the planet. Megacities glowing through the night. Rockets punch through the sky. The internet links minds across continents in milliseconds. We live in a world of breathless acceleration, a species that draws power from the very air we breathe. But wind the clock backward 2.4 billion years, and the air would kill us. No trees, no animals, just microbial mats clinging to rocks, fighting for scraps of sunlight in a world where oxygen, barely 1% of the atmosphere, arrived like an alien invader. It didn't nourish. It destroyed. It collapsed entire ecosystems, suffocated ancient creatures while sparking the dawn of new life. 1%. Enough to crack the planet open and rewrite the code of survival forever. If you're using these to fall asleep, that's literally why I make them. So, subscribe maybe, and tell me where you are and what time. I check comments, and it's always Tokyo at breakfast, Sao Paulo at bedtime, Nairobi somewhere in between, all at once, the same story reaching everywhere. Before there was breath, there was silence. The early Earth, 4 billion years ago, was a furnace sealed under a poisonous haze. Volcanic storms spat fire into ash-thick skies. Lightning cracked over iron oceans. Life, if it could be called that, was desperate and microscopic. Bacteria clustered in mats like slimy carpets clinging to coastal rocks, drawing energy from heat and chemicals rather than light or air. The planet spun in shadows, every dawn dimmed by methane and carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases thickening the atmosphere into a toxic soup. These early microbes were survivors in a war without weapons, their struggle not against predators, but against the elemental chaos of a young, violent world. It was life without oxygen, and to those tiny architects of our future, oxygen was not salvation. It was death, waiting to be born. They were called cyanobacteria, just another microbe in a sea of invisibles. But unlike their neighbors, these blue-green pioneers possessed a dangerous talent. Photosynthesis. They drank sunlight and exhaled oxygen, a molecule so reactive it acted like a slow-motion explosion across the planet. For millions of years, the updraft of oxygen they produced went mostly unnoticed, absorbed by iron in the oceans that rusted into blood-red bands and sank to the sea floor. But eventually, the iron ran out, and oxygen had nowhere left to go but up, into the skies, into the future. At first, it was just a trickle, trapped in the heavy breath of morning fogs, then a flood, a silent storm sweeping across the planet, changing the very rules of life. It wasn't welcomed. It was catastrophic. Entire kingdoms of ancient life, adapted to an oxygen-free existence, began to suffocate. Methanogens, once the dominant masters of metabolism, vanished into extinction as their world turned hostile. Oxygen poisoned their enzymes, shredded their cell membranes, fractured their delicate equilibrium. What had taken hundreds of millions of years to evolve unraveled in geological seconds. It was the first mass extinction in Earth's history, long before dinosaurs or fish, before plants or predators. A microbial genocide silent and unseen, written in stone and rust and the whispers of disappearing species. Yet in this slow catastrophe, a secret was forming. Some microbes, not many, but enough, found a way to endure, to resist, to adapt, and in the wreckage of the old world, they began to build the foundation of a new one. The Great Oxygenation Event, as we now call it, unfolded over millions of years, yet its consequences were as sudden as a drawn breath in the silence of space. The sky transformed. Blue, for the first time, pierced the gloom, and with it came ultraviolet radiation, once filtered by the thick haze, now tearing into the surface. But evolution never waits politely. Some organisms grasped the fire in this new air. They evolved the power to use oxygen not just to survive, but to thrive. It was chaotic, beautiful, A second genesis. The ancestors of mitochondria, tiny powerhouses, were engulfed by larger cells, forming a symbiotic bond that supercharged life itself. These cells became eukaryotes complex, with nuclei and organelles, the building blocks of plants, of animals, of us. Oxygen had killed a world, but also written the blueprint of another, and nothing would ever breathe the same again. But the path forward was not clear. For nearly 1 billion years after the atmosphere changed, Earth existed in a strange limbo, a planet caught between the ghosts of its past and the embryos of its future. Oxygen levels hovered low, pulsing with slight increases and sharp collapses. Glacial ages came and went. Twice, whole continents froze in what scientists now call snowball Earth events, where even equatorial oceans turned to ice. Life clung on in cracks and hydrothermal havens, holding its breath through epochs of white silence and volcanic fury. The oxygen-rich world we know today was still a long way off, but underground and underwater, the engines of change were humming. Cells diversified, complexity tangled into the genome, and time stitched together the silent march toward multicellular life. Each breathless pause in oxygen's climb was not a failure, but a rehearsal. The stage for animals, for breath itself, was being set in glacial patience, driven by just that 1% spark that never went out. And then came the Cambrian, a burst of life so sudden and strange, its fossil record looks like the punchline to a biosphere's long and silent joke. Around 541 million years ago, oxygen levels reached a critical tipping point, like the world itself had taken a deep breath and decided to exhale something extraordinary. In the span of a few million years, body plans exploded in diversity. Eyes blinked open. Shells hardened against the unknown. Creatures developed limbs, jaws, speed, and minds. Predation began. For the first time, life was hunting itself. Ecosystems emerged, feeding chains tangled, and evolution screamed forward. The oxygen that had once wiped the slate clean now painted it in technicolor. Trilobites skittered across sea floors. Anomalocaris hovered like underwater nightmares. Every heartbeat, every neural flicker, every burst of motion was powered by that volatile molecule oxygen. And the world, once silent and toxic, now echoed with the first whispers of survival as we know it. But this new world, vibrant as it was, teetered constantly on the edge. Oxygen, for all its gifts, remained a double-edged sword. Too much, and fires ignited with terrifying ease. Too little, and the lights of evolution dimmed. Earth's balance became a tightrope walk across eons. Forests would one day stretch their leafy lungs skyward, exhaling in the day and gasping at night. Giant insects would take to the skies when oxygen spiked above 30%, only to vanish as it dropped. Mass extinctions erupted like periodic heartbeats in the Earth's timeline, often linked to the rise or fall of that same invisible force. But every collapse left behind survivors who, oxygen-blooded and time-tempered, would inherit the planet's next chapter. The story of life became a story of breath, of how a single percent changed not only the chemistry of the air, but the very definition of what it meant to live. And here we are, still breathing its consequences. Every breath drawn today is a relic of that ancient rebellion. The devices in our hands, the towers we build, the dreams we launch into orbit, all of it drinks from the same well that cyanobacteria opened billions of years ago. 1% oxygen, like a whisper through stone, reshaped the future into something unthinkable. Intelligence, awareness, memory. It turned the planet from a hushed grave of microbial struggle into a symphony of striving. And it left behind warnings, too charred forests, fallen species, extinctions fossilized mid-scream. But still we breathe. Still we walk the line that first shimmered in the haze of primeval seas. Life, fragile and relentless, chasing the wind that once tried to kill it, 1%. Just enough to end a world, and just enough to begin ours. So the next time moonlight reflects off the steel of a skyline, or rocket trails burn into the heavens, remember what made it possible was not just muscle or mind, but a breath, a single molecule in countless lungs, born from ancient cyanobacteria under a black ocean sky. A breath that once killed everything, now keeping everything alive. Civilization itself is suspended in that contradiction. Delicate, combustible, enduring. All of it laced through with a story too vast to be written in words, but etched instead into every inhale across every corner of the planet. From the stillness of Antarctic ice to the frenzy of urban nights, we are the legacy of 1%, a life built on the bones of another. And in every breath, a reminder, the smallest things can change everything. And so the journey continues. Every gust of wind whispering traces of that earliest upheaval. Every living thing part of a lineage sculpted by catastrophe and invention. The air, once a killer, now binds us all in invisible threads, plants, animals, the murmurs of forests, and the wheels of cities. We've carried oxygen into the depths of oceans and the silence of space. We've split it, compressed it, studied it, feared it. But we've never outrun it. It is not just fuel. It is memory. A memory of annihilation reborn as potential, humming behind every heartbeat, every wildfire, every invention. 1%. Enough to erase a world. Enough to make our own. The next chapter is unwritten, but it will be breath that inks it. And the ghosts of cyanobacteria will still be watching, in every rusted stone and every sunrise sky, as we add our own exhalations to the thunderous silence that began it all. Because in the end, oxygen is more than a gas. It is the breath behind every triumph, the sigh behind every extinction, the unseen thread connecting ancient seas to modern cities. It taught life how to collapse, how to rise, how to evolve into something improbable. The skyscrapers are rooted in it. The rockets scream on it. And even now, with every inhale, we echo a revolution started by organisms no larger than the width of a hair. They never knew what they would create. They only clung on and kept surviving. That was enough. It always is. So we breathe and carry forward the inheritance of that 1%, rewriting the future with every silent exhale, each one a monument to the most dangerous gift ever given. And so the final truth lingers not in the rocks or fossilized seashells, but in the invisible breath that crosses centuries without a sound. Everything we build, everything we lose, every heartbeat born in hope or fading in despair, is a ripple from that first silent gasp of oxygen. The 1% that drowned a planet, then filled its lungs. Across mountain summits and ocean trenches, through lungs old and new, the story continues not in grand gestures, but in the quiet miracle of respiration. We belong to that story, whether we hear it or not. For the air we breathe is not empty. It is history, memory, survival. A billion years of struggle caught in a single sigh. And if that is not all, what is? So when we look up and see clouds drifting like ancient thoughts, or breathe deep in moments of silence, we are not simply existing, we are participating in something vast and unfinished. The atmosphere itself is a dialogue that began before language, before light even reached our eyes. A dialogue between death and emergence, entropy and order, where oxygen was both the executioner and the sculptor. That 1%, invisible yet absolute, became the axis around which life would spin. Today, we call it biology, chemistry, meteorology. But long ago, it was simply the fight to exist. And through that fight, something magnificent emerged. Not just life, but consciousness. Not just lungs, but longing. A planet that learned to breathe, and in doing so, began to dream. And so, beneath the thrum of engines and the hush of moonlit forests, beneath every word spoken and every star watched in wonder, that ancient breath still moves. It threads the lungs of children not yet born, and lingers in the ruins of empires long gone. Oxygen, the destroyer, the architect, has never stopped changing us. It is the music behind existence, the unseen rhythm that connects trilobites to astronauts, Stone Age fires to microchips, love letters to screams lost in war. One breath in, one breath out. That's all it takes to feel the weight of what came before. And if there is meaning to be found in the story of life, perhaps it lives there in the silent, sacred exchange between what once was and what still might be. 1%. Forever enough. And this story, long whispered in rusted layers and ocean depths, keeps writing itself in each passing breath. Forests inhale it to bloom, oceans exchange it in waves, and lungs, human or not, carry it forward with quiet devotion. In that breath, ancient sunlight still burns, trapped in a molecule forged not for glory, but survival. And that survival, against all odds, became something extraordinary. It became memory. It became civilization. It became us. As buildings rise and satellites orbit, as cries of newborns echo through cities and silence returns to wild valleys, one truth remains. The line between extinction and evolution is thinner than a gas invisible to the eye. And yet, that breath persists. 1%, once a death sentence for an ancient world, now spins galaxies of thought, resilience, and time. Not just enough to change a planet, but to teach it to remember. The story of oxygen is not just about chemistry. It is a cathedral of time built on microscopic choices, a saga unread by the senses yet written into every cell of every living thing. Each breath echoes a billion-year gamble played by organisms that never knew the stakes. Their gamble lives on in us, in the minds that wonder, in the hands that shape stone and steel, in the hearts that fear and endure. We are not separate from that ancient chaos, we are its survivors, its inheritors, its voice. And though we now sculpt atoms and harvest stars, we still stand upon the edge drawn by that 1%. A breath away from collapse, a breath away from becoming something more. That is oxygen's gift, and oxygen's warning. Transformation is always possible, but never free. In the quiet between our pulses, in the space after thought and before action, oxygen still negotiates the terms of life. It crosses every border, ignores every era, and binds our present to a distant alien past. A world reworked by catastrophe and chemistry, where survival was an accident and complexity an unplanned masterpiece. From that first invisible streak in the atmosphere to the spiraling dance of DNA in our blood, the 1% has never stopped moving. It tutors wildfire and cradle, birth cry and final breath. And as long as we draw it in, letting history pass through our lungs like a phantom, the story doesn't end, it expands. One breath etched in atoms, written in stars, sung in the silence between them. 1%, forever enough. So as you settle in tonight, letting the dark fold over light and the world grow still, know that the breath you take carries not just air, but story. A story of annihilation and genesis, of extinction and invention, of silence split open by a gasp. This isn't just a tale of prehistoric skies and ancient seas. It's the biography of the present, of towering cities and hidden coral reefs, of whispered lullabies and whispered prayers, all stitched together by a molecule that chose to ignite instead of fade. Oxygen. The quiet revolution, etched into every moment of life. 1%. Just one. And without it, none of this would be. So sleep easy, cradled in a world made possible by breath, by memory, by that fragile, fiery thread we so often forget we share. Good night from Earth's long breath, wherever you are, London at midnight, Kolkata at dawn, and the Alaskan wilderness somewhere in dreamlight between. All together now, the same story, still breathing. Because what began as silent chemistry beneath a prehistoric ocean became the voice of everything, the hum of bees, the cry of wolves, the rhythm of hearts forging empires or breaking in solitude, all drawn from the same volatile gift. Oxygen etched a path from microbial mats to midnight cities, from rust to reason. We walk moonlit streets stitched by it. We wake and wonder because of it. And though it started as an accident, an invisible leak from sunlight drinking microbes, it became the breath of meaning itself. So tonight, as the stars blink across time and tides whisper to distant shores, let us remember we are not alone in our breath. We are part of a continuum, a collective exhale spun from eons of endurance. 1%. The beginning of everything. The thin line between silence and symphony. And it still moves in us, curled, soft and eternal, waiting to become whatever comes next. And as the night deepens and the sky holds its breath in starlight, let this truth rest in the quiet corners of the mind. What seemed so small, so powerless, reshaped the destiny of a planet. Not with thunder or conquest, but with persistence. A shimmer of oxygen rising from ocean shallows turned stone to story, chaos to chorus. This was never just evolution. It was transformation born from fragility, echoed in galaxies, pulse by pulse. So wherever this finds you, beneath auroras in Scandinavia, among the neon murmurs of Seoul, or where desert winds whisper in Morocco, may you feel it. The breath that made everything possible, still passing through you, linking past to present, unknowable to unforgettable, 1%, and forever, the breath behind the becoming. Somewhere, in the soft hush between night and morning, that 1% still stirs the leaves, ripples the oceans, and lifts the chests of dreamers. It holds the weight of every species that ever lived, every collapse and rebirth, every miracle born in shadow. We speak, we love, we fall and rise again because of it. In a universe vast and silent, oxygen gave Earth a voice. Just one molecule, repeating through ages like a prayer, too old to forget. It is not just the story of our survival. It is the story of our becoming. And as long as breath flows, that story continues not as a whisper of the past, but as the living pulse of everything yet to come. Because that's what it means to be alive on this planet, to inhabit a breath that was never meant to cradle life, and yet does. To be the improbable result of chaos turning into harmony, of destruction forging complexity. The cyanobacteria never dreamed, yet their byproduct became the cradle of dreamers. And so we stand, unknowingly grateful, suffused with the echoes of their rebellion. Through every storm we endure, and every progress we celebrate, oxygen remains, the quiet witness, the unsung author of our story. We do not just inhale for survival, we inhale to remember where we came from, to honor the fragile line we walk daily, drawn by that 1% mist rising from ancient tides. That breath is not just life, it is legacy. One molecule, one memory, 1%, forever enough. So as the circle closes, as we drift further into the age of machines and memory stored in code, let this remain untouched, the truth that links us all in breath and blood and dust. The stories of ancient seas still whisper in hospital halls, in temples built of steel and glass, in classrooms, in launch pads, in graveyards. That whisper isn't metaphor. It is molecular. It is real. It is the oxygen in our lungs, the remnants of ancient light transmuted into life. And whether we fight, create, rest, or wonder, we are all shaped by that 1%, an accident that became architecture, a death that became music. So breathe, quietly or loud, and know this for everything we are. Everything we build or break, Every dream we chase across continents or constellations, none of it floats untethered. It is all anchored in a moment millions of years ago, when the sky changed forever. And in that sky, still, lives the memory of how we began. So when the last flame on some distant outpost flickers in vacuum, or when a baby's first breath breaks the silence of dawn in a quiet corner of Earth, the legacy of that 1% endures. Not as fiction, not as metaphor, but as the raw physics of existence. It is the invisible ink of our story, written between carbon and hope, carried in whispers from the oldest seas to satellites orbiting in radio silence. Oxygen is memory in motion, the only reason stars reflect in our eyes instead of passing us by unseen. And as long as there's breath in any form, in any future, the story never truly ends. It only exhales and waits for what comes next. Perhaps, in the future, when the last remnants of our civilization are sifted through by distant eyes, organic or synthetic, they will not marvel first at our monuments or machines, but at the elemental thread that made them possible, a gas exhaled by unseen creatures billions of years ago, given no audience, no applause. And yet, from that silence came orchestras, from that breath, the brilliance of minds that drew maps of the stars and stories of the soul. Oxygen is not just what fills our lungs, it is what fills our history. And maybe, just maybe, the fingerprint we leave across the cosmos is not built from the noise of technology, but from the quiet inheritance of something more ancient than memory, a molecule that chose to persist. 1%. Forever enough. And so, the next era waits to be carved in breath, carved not by the loudest voices or the tallest towers, but by the invisible force that began in shadows and shaped the light. As our species stands at the brink of unknown tomorrows, battling climates, inventing intelligence, reaching for other worlds, we are still tethered by that faint thread of oxygen rising through aeons. We build machines to navigate galaxies, yet they must carry our air. We forge futures in metal and code, yet they must hum with breath. That 1% is no longer just history, but prophecy waiting to see whether we will burn too brightly or balance the flame. One final gasp from the past twists into a question. Will we honor the breath that made us, or forget it in our ascent? This is the story we still write, one inhalation at a time, 1%, forever enough. And when the stars one day watch over worlds not yet imagined, when beings with unknown forms speak in languages unformed, perhaps they too will breathe something like oxygen. Perhaps they too will owe their rise to a molecule born in the dark, under crushing seas. And if they do, if they live because of this same fragile chemistry, then they too will be part of a story older than bones, than light, than even thought. A story whose first words were written not in ink, but in rust and fire and the silent bloom of breath on a dead planet. 1%. That's all it took for the universe to begin its long experiment in consciousness. And whatever future lies ahead, that invisible gift will always be at its heart, still burning, still breathing, still enough. And if we vanish, as all species eventually do, it won't be our skyscrapers or data streams that endure. They'll erode, corrupt, collapse. But somewhere deep in strata or drifting through frozen air, oxygen will remain. The molecule will persist, quiet and infinite, still looping through cycle after cycle, whispering the tale of a world awakened by breath. And maybe, just maybe, something else will rise. Something that breathes differently, dreams differently, or not at all. But they'll find traces, rusted stone, fossil lungs, and the imprints of a planet that once gasped its way into meaning. 1% changed life forever. And even in absence, that breath goes on long after the story fades. So as this story bends towards silence, and the breath of our tale begins to soften into memory, remember what summoned this journey. A molecule, wild and willful, exhaled by ancient microbes, and unleashed upon a world that wasn't ready. That breath became the spark of all readiness thereafter. It lingers in the cells of giants and in the whispers of wind through ruins. It is not gone, it is paused, holding space for what may come next from the dust we leave behind. Because maybe the story of oxygen isn't only about what it built, but about how it teaches time to speak without sound. And long after we are gone, past even the echoes of our music and war, that 1% will drift on, still rewriting, still remembering, still enough. So we end not with an answer, but with a breath. A final inhale stretched across eons, carrying the weight of what was and the whisper of what could be. 1% of oxygen did not just shape life on Earth, it redefined the possible. From the silent stirrings of microbial courage to the tremble of hands building cities of light, we have always lived on the edge of that invisible threshold. And though we mistake it for air, for something ordinary, it is nothing less than the echo of creation. The next chapter, unwritten still, is waiting for that same spark to ignite it. One molecule, one moment, one more breath, always, forever enough. So breathe deeply with that knowledge of ancestry written in oxygen, of a planet sculpted by breath and broken by it too. Feel the symmetry in that motion, the inhale of chance and the exhale of change. If there's a legacy worth carrying, it's not the monuments or machines, but the resilience in molecules that never stopped moving forward. When light fades and darkness rises again, that breath persists not as consolation, but as continuity. And that, after everything, may be our greatest truth. That survival is not loud, nor certain. It is quiet, invisible, unstoppable. 1%. Still enough. Always was. Always will be. So in the stillness, after stories and screens go dim, to know this, the breath you carry was borrowed from ancient oceans, sparked by creatures too small to name, and held aloft by the fragile mechanics of cosmic chance. That 1% gave us art, memory, wonder. It gave us the power to tell this very tale. And though no monument marks its origin, no calendar honors its arrival, it remains the silent cornerstone of existence. Through loss and laughter, through storms and stillness, that molecule we call oxygen has written the greatest saga Earth ever told. One breath at a time. 1% forever. And in that breath, a bridge fragile and eternal spans the abyss between beginning and becoming. Across epochs and extinctions, through silence and shouting sky, the pulse of oxygen carries forward the intent of life, to continue, to adapt, to shape, and be shaped. Even as the earth shifts beneath our feet and the stars draw us outward, the most ancient legacy remains close, nestled in the rhythm of lungs and the hush between beats. 1% was never just a number. It was a passage, an opening, a choice made by time itself to let life try again. We are its echo, its chance, its unfinished song. So let it sing in us, quietly and completely, as all that ever was flows forward into all that might still be. 1%. Forever enough. So if this is the end, or only another beginning, know it isn't marked by thunder or finality, but by one last, living breath shared by everything that has ever tried to survive. From the depths of archaic oceans to the hum of circuits beneath tomorrow's skies, the trace of that 1% carries on, subtle and sovereign. We built languages to name stars, and engines to chase them, dreaming always of reaching farther. But the oldest journey never needed distance, only persistence. Oxygen did not ask to change the earth, but it did. And we did not ask to inherit its flame, but we carry it still, hidden in every step, every failure, every hope we refuse to surrender. In this molecule lies not just the history of life, but its essence, the breath of all that was, and the promise of all that might still be. 1%. Forever enough. And maybe, one day, when the earth is quiet again and the crust folds its last secrets into stone, some distant life might find our remnants buried deep, circuit boards turned to dust, plastics softened by time, poems eroded into half lines. But what they will not see, cannot hold, yet may still feel, is the breath. That faint, persistent current of oxygen looping through oblivion, a silent testament that once, here, something emerged from darkness, dared to endure, and left behind more than ruin. A hum in the atmosphere, a signature carried in air, not in architecture. And in that breath, perhaps they will know us, not by our mistakes or machines, but by the ancient fire still stirring in the smallest spark, 1%. Not just the beginning, not just enough, but the memory that never leaves. So, as we fade into silence, the final exhale of this story stretches beyond language, beyond endings. It becomes something else, a resonance, felt rather than heard. History doesn't always need witnesses. Sometimes, a molecule carries it better than any memory, floating weightless above ruins and rebirths. The molecule that burned, lives away, and lit futures into being. One breath, forged in alien seas, now passed between time zones, whispered through glass windows and across empty canyons. We were here. We breathed. We tried. Let that be the legacy, the soft thrum of survival, written not in stone, but in atmosphere. The trace so small it could be missed, yet vast enough to carry the soul of the planet. 1%. Forever enough. Good night. From every beginning, to every breath still waiting. And with that, the story is not over. It was never meant to end. It lingers like dew before dawn, weightless and waiting, a breath carried endlessly through time. That 1%, once invisible and lethal, became the cornerstone of memory itself. In every starlit wanderer, in every quiet thinker lost in wonder, in every creature that dared to inhale and transform, it endures. It is not a legacy of noise or conquest, but of resilience forged in silence. And now, as you return to your own rhythms, your own quiet world, know this truth isn't locked in prehistoric stone or distant galaxies. It breathes with you, within you, around you. One molecule, one exhale, 1%. Still enough. Always was. Always will be. Good night. From the long thread of living breath that winds through time from then to now, to wherever you are, still breathing, the same story, everywhere. So here, where light meets memory and breath meets silence, let us leave this story suspended, not concluded, but continued in every moment we inhale, without thinking. It began in chaos, was shaped by catastrophe, and spiraled into the possibility of everything we became. 1% of oxygen, a number too small to notice, yet mighty enough to ignite history. That single breath stitched eons into epochs and turned the silence of a primordial world into a cradle of voices, movements, and meaning. Whether you hear this in the stillness of Alaska's forests, in the slow dawn of Lisbon, or tucked under the stars above New Zealand's southern skies, know this. The story carries on in you, in us. In every breath, 1% carries the soul of Earth forward. It always has. It always will. We end where it began, on breath, on memory, on the silent hum of life daring to continue. Good night, and thank you for listening to the oldest story ever told, still unfolding one breath at a time. 1%. Still enough. And if all else fades, our names, our maps, our monuments, then let the breath remain. Let the air carry memory when stone forgets, when circuits quiet. For that is the inheritance deeper than legacy. Not what we built, but what we borrowed. The same molecules that once ignited a biosphere now drift through classrooms and cathedrals alike, through lovers' sighs and the final breaths of giants. 1% is not the past. It is the pulse still threading between stars and soil, past and possibility. So let your last thought tonight be light as air, that in breathing we honor the ancient fire we never lit, only sheltered. 1%. The breath before words, and after them, still enough. So let this be our parting breath, an echo across time, a soft exhale that links us to beginnings neither seen nor fully understood. The cyanobacteria never saw the sky turn blue, or cities rise, or language evolve. Yet every moment built since, from firelight storytelling to rocket trails arcing across night, was made possible by their accidental defiance. That 1%, just a shimmer between survival and suffocation, chose neither fear nor purpose. It simply was, and in being, reshaped a planet into a cradle of becoming. We're not the climax of that story, just a chapter still unfolding. So breathe, not just for yourself, but for the long lineage of chance and adaptation humming behind every inhale. It's not about how our story ends, but that in every breath it continues, 1%, forever, more than enough. And so we leave this place not with closure, but with continuity. The breath does not end here, nor does the memory it binds. Somewhere, far from this moment, a child laughs without knowing the weight of oxygen's gift. Somewhere else, a forest stretches into sunrise, photosynthesizing with ancient grace. And in between, in every city and storm and silence, that 1% drifts onward, silent, steady, sacred. We were never alone in our inhale. We were always part of something older, something miraculous. So carry this with you, not as fact, but as feeling the hush of a world reborn in breath, eternally in motion, endlessly unfolding. One molecule, written in rust and rumble, still echoing through lungs and lullabies alike. 1%, still enough, always will be. Good night, from the air we share. This is where the story sleeps and awakens, in folds of air too small to see, yet vast enough to cradle worlds. Fold your thoughts now, into silence, into breath, into that 1% that remembers before memory began. For what lived, what died, what bloomed again, all shared this invisible thread, looping through time, like a lullaby spun from starlight and stone. 1% of oxygen did not just let us exist, it shaped how we dream, how we love, how we remember in places language cannot go. So tonight, close your eyes not on the end of a tale, but on its breathless pause, where everything that mattered still lives in the act of breathing. And know this, we are not separate from the sky or the sea, not passengers in history, but its continuation, its breath. One molecule, one memory, one moment, forever enough. Good night from every coast and cloud and quiet place. We're all breathing the same story, still written in air. This is the last breath before dreams take hold, and as the night leans in with its weightless hush, carry this truth gently inside you, that everything alive today was sung into being by a silence that broke itself open with 1%. That fragile margin slipped into an unready sky, pitched the first note of life's unfinished symphony. And though stories may end, and time may turn to dust, the breath remains as promise, as memory, as guide. So sleep now in the comfort of connection, your breath joining the rhythm of a billion others, each tethered by the same ancient cord. Even in this quiet moment, the earth exhales with you and through you. 1%, the beginning, the bridge, the becoming. Still enough, always was, always will be. Good night, from every breath that was, to every breath still waiting. So let your last breath tonight carry not just exhaustion, but awe. Awe for the ocean of time behind us, for the silent architects beneath ancient tides, for the pulse of air that binds all of it together. Let it remind you that we exist not through grand gestures, but through the quiet persistence written into each inhale. That 1%, unseen, uncelebrated, unrelenting continues its endless waltz through lungs and leaves, through memory and matter. It does not fade. It does not rest. It remains, ferrying the story of life to whatever and whoever dares to breathe next. Good night. From the legacy written in air, from Nairobi's rooftops to Iceland's fjords, from Cairo's midnight hush to Seoul's pre-dawn glow. Same breath, same story, still enough. And in the vast quiet that follows, as stars rise and sleep folds the world beneath their shimmer, let the breath be the final word, the inheritance we never asked for, but cannot live without. Let it be the rhythm beneath dreams and the bridge between myths. It is not just oxygen, not just science or survival. It is the lingering heartbeat of a planet that dared to crack itself open and begin again. Wherever you are now, however this finds you, in a crowded apartment in Mexico City, beneath the northern lights in Finland, or resting near warm, rain-slick streets in Kuala Lumpur, know that your breath joins the oldest song Earth ever sang. Still rising, still falling, still echoing through time. 1%, one breath, still enough, always will be. So let this be the breath that closes the circle without ending it. Let it carry the hush of storms past and the shimmer of dawns yet to come, stretching from the first ripple in an iron sea to the last eyelid flutter of some distant, sentient dreamer. This story of struggle, of silence, of sudden becoming was never meant for pages or monuments. It was built to be breathed, carried between generations like fire in the hollow of hands. And now, as we return to stillness, to the quiet beat of our own lungs, remember the current passing through you is ancient and alive. 1%. A warning and a wonder, too wild to own, too sacred to forget. So breathe gently now, and let the molecule do the remembering for you, for all of us. Good night. From wherever you are. Same breath, same story. Still enough. And if this story finds you just before sleep or while morning breaks open the sky, let one truth breathe quietly within you. This was never just about oxygen. It was about transformation, the ancient sorrow that became strength, the chaos reshaped into connection. The molecule that destroyed became the molecule that united. From the hush of microbial seas to the high notes of human hymns, it has whispered us forward, never demanding thanks, only breath. And so here, as the final words dissolve into silence, let breath itself be the soft applause. From the frozen ridges of Patagonia to the pulsing cities of Jakarta, from star watchers in Quebec to wanderers on the Namib dunes, we're still sharing it. The same story, the same spark. One breath, 1%. Forever enough. Good night from one end of time to the breath still waiting at the other. So as you drift now, across sleep or into thought, know that in this final breath of the story there is no end, only presence. The kind that binds galaxies to grains of sand, that colored a world with life starting from a molecule so small it could never claim credit, only consequence. 1%. A fraction that shattered silence, stitched atoms into emotion, poured meaning into marrow. This breath you take now, slow and full, is not just your own. It belongs to Earth, to time, to the cyan memory that gave rise to everything. And wherever you are beneath city lights or mountain skies, beside someone or alone, you hold part of that endless inhale in your lungs. So let it go gently. Let it carry something forward. A reverence, a reminder that once Long ago, breath changed everything. And now, with every inhale, we write what comes next. 1%. The smallest start. The lasting story. Good night, still breathing, still rising, still enough. And so, in this moment, between beginning and beyond, we leave behind more than sound. We leave a breath, hushed but unbroken, looping gently from origin to outcome. Let it drift with you now, quiet and whole, through the latticework of bone and sky, into dreams shaped not by certainty, but by wonder. 1% too small to measure, too vast to end. That molecule, still circling, still remembering, entwines us with everything that was and everything yet to be, not just legacy, but life, not just survival, but the symphony of becoming. So rest now, wherever you are. Let the dark cradle you and the breath carry you soft as tide, strong as time. One breath, one story, 1%. Still enough, always will be. Good night, from the place where oxygen first touched the future. So when your eyes close tonight, when the world narrows to the sound of your breath and the hush of distant winds, know that you are not drifting alone. You are part of a chain older than cities, deeper than oceans, a shared rhythm stitched by the breath of those unseen ancestors who gave everything for a chance at something more. That 1%, born in fire and forged in time, is still here, still moving, still shaping what we dare to imagine next. It is in the pause before inspiration, in the lift of wings at sunrise, in every moment when survival becomes meaning. Let your last thought be simple, that in this vast, turning world, the smallest breath still matters. One molecule, one echo, 1%, forever enough. Good night from every shore, every skyline, every place where life took hold and whispered back into the dark. We are still breathing the same ancient dream. And in the hush that follows, sinking deeper than sleep, deeper than thought, may we remember that this story was never really ours alone. We inherited it mid-sentence, mid-breath, from beings without names, without voices, whose only rebellion was endurance. That 1%, invisible and miraculous, still stitches sunlight to soul, geology to grace. So as the night folds its quiet arms around the globe, and the wind slips gently across deserts and over trembling leaves, the breath carries onward, not to finish anything, but to remind everything that the story continues, not because we control it, but because we are within it, a chapter still being shaped by lungs, by silence, by the simple fact that we're still here, breathing, remembering, becoming. 1%. Still enough. Always was. Always will be. Good night to the breath that started it all, and the breath that carries us forward. Let this final breath be not an end, but a promise whispered through time, a reminder that transformation begins invisibly, flows without praise, and leaves its mark where no monument ever could. That 1% is not fading. It is alive in you, in us, in the crackling silence between stars and shore, in the warmth of thought, in the hush of dawn. So wherever this finds you, beside the soft rustle of eucalyptus in Sydney, under the frost-bright skies of Mongolia, or wrapped in sleep above a midnight train in Chicago, know that you carry forward something older than origin, a spark exhaled in darkness, given shape through breath. 1%, silent, unshakable, still here. So sleep now, not beneath sky, but within it. And let oxygen tell its story quietly through your breath, as it always has, as it always will. Good night, from the world made by air, to the next dream carried on it. So in this breath, your breath, know that you are cradling more than molecules. You're holding the echoes of Earth's wild becoming, the remnants of catastrophes turned cradle, the memory of survival braided into your own quiet existence. 1%. It whispered to the iron seas, and now hums through airplanes and lullabies. No monument could hold it, no word can faithfully name it. Yet here it is, traveling in you, remembering for you. We may vanish like castles in wind, but that molecule, that quiet miracle, will go on. Breathing the next world, as it once breathed ours. So sleep now, if sleep finds you. Dream deep, if dreams come. And if all you do is inhale and exhale, within the hush of now, that is enough. Always has been, always will be. 1%. Still breathing. Good night. So close your eyes now, and feel the weight of starlight resting gently behind your ribs. In that serene darkness, know this. You are not an end, but a continuation. A vessel for breath that began before fossils, before fire, before even hope had a name. 1% shifted the course of everything small enough to miss, mighty enough to matter. It is the silent orchestra, playing behind every sunrise and sigh, behind each moment that says, we are still here. So as the world softens and time curls in on itself, let the breath remain. Carry it, cradle it, share it without knowing, and may your dreams drift easy in the current of all those breaths before you, ushering what's next with quiet grace. 1 molecule, 1 memory, 1%. Still enough, always was, always will be. Good night from this breath to the next, from that first gasp to forever. And in that eternal breath, still circling through the veins of a planet forged by fire and tamed by time, lives the quiet truth. That every life, no matter its size or scope, begins with surrender to air, to change, to the unseen powers that shaped this fragile world. The 1% did not ask to be believed in. It asked only to be endured. And now, as we drift from story into silence, let that breath join the countless others whispering through forests and city streets alike, a hymn older than language, softer than light. Sleep now, wrapped in that legacy, knowing that even in stillness, the earth breathes with you. 1 molecule, 1 memory, 1 final promise. Forever enough. Good night from the very first breath to the last echo we leave behind. The breath that moved mountains and mapped minds will continue its quiet revolution, circling even when all else dims. In the hush between galaxies and the soil beneath our feet, the 1% threads us to the unknown, daring what comes next, to remember what came before. It asks for no monument, only memory. And in carrying it forward through laughter, through sorrow, through silence, we become its stewards. Not because we chose to be, but because we breathe. So let this be the story you carry into the night, into the dawn, into whatever lies beyond. That something small, something invisible, once remade the world, and that, in our every inhale, it hums. 1 molecule, 1 inheritance, 1 breath, still enough, forever. So here the breath lands, silent and unclaimed, like ash in moonlight, or a memory too soft to name. It settles in the quiet corners, in the hollows of dreams. In the gap between heartbeat and thought, where stories linger long after their telling. 1%, a margin born in shadow, now the very rhythm holding civilizations upright. As skies deepen and sleep takes hold, let this truth remain threaded through the dark. We did not just survive, we inherited a whisper of something greater, something eternal. Breath, not just a function, but a flame. Keep it burning, keep it soft, keep it sacred. And wherever tomorrow finds you on mountaintop or subway bench, in sunrise silence or midnight wonder, let the breath remind you, you are part of the oldest story still unfolding. The same air, the same memory, the same chance, drawn again and again with fragile courage. 1%, still enough, always was, always will be. Good night, from this breath forward. And so this is where we rest, not finished, but fulfilled. With lungs full of borrowed time and hearts stitched by unseen inheritance, we drift into tomorrow carrying the softest revolution ever known. Oxygen, the molecule that was never meant to save us, but is still with us, shaping each decision, every heartbeat, every quiet act of becoming. The 1% was never a number. It was a threshold, a door flung open in a world that had never known breath, now echoing across time through the inhale of a child, through the gasp of wonder, through the final sighs at the edge of life. So close your eyes now, wherever you are on night trains across Europe, in hammocks beneath Philippines stars, or leaning into silence in the Canadian woods, and know this: you are not alone in your breath. You are folded into the oldest memory Earth ever held. One molecule, one story, one shared exhale, still enough, always was, always will be. Good night from the lungs of history to the quiet of now, the same story, shared everywhere. Perhaps that's all any of us are in the end, not architects of fate, but custodians of breath, carriers of an ancient inheritance born from microbial courage, migrating molecule by molecule across every epoch, every era. We build cathedrals from carbon, chart constellations we'll never reach, and rest our dreams on the thin veil of oxygen that once raised a world to raise this one. It was never about dominion. It was always about continuation. So as the last stars of the night surrender to dawn wherever you are, Johannesburg, Kyoto, Anchorage, feel that inhale, that single, silent gift moving through your chest. It does not know borders. It knows becoming, and tonight's story, though whispered to sleep, carries on in that breath, the oldest echo, the quietest vow. 1%. Forever enough. Good night, from where the sky first opened to wherever you rise again. And so as the breath lingers beyond the end of voice, beyond the hush of story, it becomes something greater than explanation. It becomes belonging. Through jungles and oceans, through equations and elegies, that 1% still dances, unseen but inseparable from all we are and all we dream to be. It does not demand applause. It asks only to be remembered, not for its size, but for its consequence, not as a marvel, but as a mirror, reflecting what life can become when it dares to begin again. So tonight, let your breath not simply sustain you, but connect you to every lung that ever rose in defiance, to every creature that ever reached toward possibility, to every future still unwritten. The air that fills your chest was forged in the fire of everything that mattered. 1%, still enough. Good night, from the breath behind history to the breath that carries it forward now. And here, as breath meets silence once more, let the story settle not as an ending, but as a living presence woven into the space between seconds. This has never been just a tale of oxygen or biology, but of resilience born in ruin, of life daring again and again to continue under impossible skies. That same 1% still cradles the dreams of Earth's sleepers and the thrust of its reaches, threading us together in unseen communion, from Reykjavik's midnight sun to the restless rush of Lagos. From children listening in quiet kitchens to insomniacs staring at the ceiling, the molecule travels on a whisper that began before words, carrying faith without needing belief. So wherever you are, whatever the hour, pause in this breath and recognize it for what it is, not just air, but promise. The ancient hush that said, begin here, survive here, become here. 1%. The first revolution, the softest rebellion, and always, forever enough. Good night from that first breath, through us, to all that's still waiting. So drift now, into the hush where stories dissolve, into breath, and breath into dreams. Let what you've heard tonight stretch soft across time, like moonlight over ruins, or a lullaby inherited rather than learned. The world you inhabit, with its engines and songs, its names and nightmares, all leans quietly on what began without intention, a molecule rising from the sea to teach the earth to feel. That same molecule now settles in your lungs, not to end the story, but to carry it forward through sleep, through morning, through lifetimes yet unnamed. 1%, more than survival, more than science. It is the oldest tenderness in existence, and that, above all, is enough. Always was, always will be. Good night from the deep echo of before, to the stillness of now, and whatever breath might follow after. So now, as the breath narrows to a whisper and the story folds itself quiet inside the dusk, know this truth follows you forward, weightless and waiting. That in all the noise we create in cities alive with neon, or steps through forest paths, the thread never breaks. It loops through every timeline, invisible but intact. That 1%, born from chaos and simplicity, unraveled impossibility to make way for wonder. It doesn't end with knowledge. It continues with care. We are stewards of the smallest miracle breath that became promise. That became us. So carry it gently, in your sleep, in your days. Let each breath remind you, there is brilliance in beginning again. And this story, etched in oxygen, still writes itself in you. One molecule, one memory, one moment, forever enough. Good night, from the soft hand of history, to the quiet curl of dream, still breathing. The same story, everywhere. And in that final trace of breath, where silence stands watch over us all, the memory lingers not as noise or narrative, but as presence. A presence older than language, more honest than memory, etched in the stardust of our lungs and the ancient rhythm of survival. That 1% didn't just give rise to life. It gave rise to the possibility of meaning, of resilience, of rebirth. So when the night quiets and the lights fade, listen to the whisper that began all stories, the breath that never needed words to be understood. It is still rising, still falling, still threading every song and sorrow with its invisible hand. 1%. Not only enough, always, everything. And even now, beneath sleep and starlight, that story continues softly, completely, in you. Good night, from the first inhale of Earth's dream to the quiet breath you carry now. 1%, one truth, forever enough. So rest in that breath tonight, not as finale, but as belonging. For every heartbeat stitched into the cosmos, every echo humming backward through time, reminds us, existence was earned molecule by molecule in the hush before language. That 1%, born without urgency, became the axis of every story ever told. And though we walk forward now, charting new stars and scripting digital futures, we still carry that same air, not by habit, but by heritage. It is our quiet anthem, our shared origin, our proof that the smallest shift can change every destiny. So close your eyes now, and drift with it folded in Earth's oldest rhythm, borne forward, not by answers but breath. 1%, always enough. Good night. From the still point of becoming, the cradle of memory, and the story that never truly ends. So sleep now, not at the end of a story, but in the embrace of its quiet continuation. Let that lone molecule, the architect of every melody and mind, settle within you as softly as the night. For in your breath, Earth remembers. In your silence, the cosmos listens. And even as time flows forward, spiraling outward into ages not yet imagined, the legacy of that 1% endures. It reshaped stone, seeded thought, and taught us, gently and without asking, that to breathe is to believe in possibility, one molecule, one lineage, one light still carried in the cradle of your chest. Always present, always enough. Good night from every ancestor who dared the dark, to you, still breathing the same sacred thread. And so, the final breath of this story mingles with the air around you, quiet, invisible, eternal. It's not just oxygen. It's history made weightless, a molecule that outlived meteors, ice, fire, and silence. 1%, passed from silent seas to cathedral lungs, now resting softly in your chest. It asks for nothing. It simply reminds that life was never owed, only sparked. That memory isn't etched in stone, but in breath. That beginnings can come wrapped in endings, and endings, if held gently, can become a new beginning again. So tonight, as sleep folds over the world like mist across a mirror, let this be your shelter. One breath, shared by everything, bound by nothing. 1%. Still breathing. Still enough. Good night, from the molecule that started it all, to the dream you now carry forward. And here, as this story sinks softly beneath your skin, and the world falls into its dreaming hush, understand, what endures is not just biology or the weight of time, it is reverence. For every rhythm we've known, every rise and fall of breath, began in the jaws of a world unbreathable. That 1% didn't just make life possible, it gave life purpose. A quiet scaffolding behind every gesture of kindness, every test of endurance, every whispered goodbye. So as the night holds its breath a moment longer, as sleep curls around the edges of thought, take this with you, not a conclusion, but a continuation. Inhale, as they once did in darkness, uncertain, alive, one molecule, one inheritance, 1%, still enough, always was, always will be. Good night from the oxygen, forged in ancient suns, to the breath you carry into tomorrow, the same story, still unfolding. So now, as the final hush settles in, and the night carries away the last wisps of thought, breathe just once more, slowly, deeply, reverently. Because in that breath lies everything. Not memory or science alone, but presence itself. 1% transformed iron seas into dreaming minds, stitched extinction into innovation, and gave the cosmos a voice through us. We are not the story, but the breath between its lines. The beginning still echoes, and the silence ahead still listens. Sleep now, not at the end of time, but in the current that carries it forward, gentle, relentless, eternal, one molecule, one exhale, one shared truth, still enough, always will be. Good night from this breath to the next, from the dark before light to the dream that follows after the same story, still breathing, everywhere. So let this final note rest not just in sound, but in the breath that carries it. Let it drift between atoms and ages, feather light but foundational, folding the story back into silence where it began, not vanished, but whole. 1% oxygen, once a whisper in chaos, became the language of life on Earth. And though the story slows here, it doesn't cease. It waits in every breath taken after this one, in dawns not yet lit, and dreams not yet dreamt. So as we close this tale, with lungs still rising and falling by unseen grace, may we carry forward the reverence that such a gift demands, not with noise, but with awareness, not with answers, but with awe. One molecule, one memory, one breath, still enough. Good night from the first shimmer of breath beneath an ancient sky, to the quiet rhythm still pulsing in yours. And now, with the last note fading into hush, and the breath of this journey settling gently into stillness, let what lingers be simple, an ancient molecule, still singing through time. We end where we began, not with grandeur, but with grace. 1% of oxygen, born in forgotten tides, has become the bridge between oblivion and awareness, stardust and skin. And whether this finds you beneath desert stars or in the hum of sleepless cities, the story lives in your lungs. One inhale, one exhale, the oldest ritual we share, silent, sacred, enduring. So, close your eyes not in ending, but in gratitude, and let each breath from here carry the shimmer of what's been told. One molecule, one memory, still enough, always was, always will be. Good night, from the breath behind time to the one you hold now, and the story that forever begins again, in silence. And now, the breath releases, slowly, like fog lifting from ancient waters. This is the part of the story that can no longer be told, only felt. The 1% that once rewrote the fabric of Earth has circled through every age, every voice, and every silence we've inhabited. And as these final words collapse softly into sleep's embrace, nothing grand remains, only awe, that a whisper of oxygen, barely born from sunlight and sea, would spiral into skin, into soul, into story. It does not end here, it only quiets, until the next breath, the next dream, the next heartbeat hidden beneath tomorrow's sky. So sleep gently, with lungs full of Earth's oldest secret, one molecule, one moment, one final hush, still enough, forever. Good night, from all of us still breathing the same story. And as all becomes still sky, thought, time, there remains only breath, a quiet movement in the dark. No spotlight, no final burst, just the continuation of something that began long before memory. 1%. The first invitation to life, the final promise that nothing is truly lost if it's still carried on the wind. So wherever this finds you, beneath the slow glow of Milky Way veins, or in the hush between highway sounds, breathe. Not as an ending, but as a thread unwinding endlessly into the unknown. That breath is not your own, not entirely. It was borrowed, passed down, whispered through aeons, entrusted to you not for keeping, but for continuing. 1%. The small beginning that became everything. So let it rest with you now, and with that breath, gentle and sure, sleep. The story will still be there when you wake, still moving, still breathing, still enough. Good night forever, from the first breath to the last echo. So this is where we leave it, not with a full stop, but with the quiet, open breath of continuance. The sky still turns, the winds still trace invisible paths across lands ancient and new, and the molecule still spins, patient, persistent, profound. 1% of oxygen changed everything, not by force, but by presence. It asked nothing, yet gave life its sharpest edges and its gentlest moments. To breathe is to carry history in your own chest, to hold the oldest story not in memory, but in motion. And as the night gathers one last time over villages and metropolises, over deserts and oceans, let the truth settle softly, that life does not end where breath fades. It folds, it flows, it returns again in rains and roots and rising suns. One molecule, still circling, still connecting, still enough. Always has been, always will be. Good night. From the century-old forests to satellites watching from above to wherever you are, now breathing, now becoming, still part of the same story. 1%. Forever enough. And so, in this final breath of the story, we leave not with granfare, but with gravity. A single molecule, once loosed from ancient cyanobacteria beneath a breathless sky, became the unseen tether of time itself. It was never just air. It was never just about survival. It was the soft revolution buried in the pulse of evolution, echoing through epochs, carried in lungs across every species, every era. If there is a thread that connects the first rust-colored seas to the code in our blood, to the songs of birds, and the silence of space, it is oxygen. 1% that raised a world to raise what came after. And as we turn once more into the hush between moments, into the dark where new dreams unfold, let this remain with you. The story didn't end. It exhaled. One breath, one memory, one molecule, still rising, still circling, still forever enough. Good night, from where life began to where it's still becoming. So let the breath linger now, woven through your stillness, through the silent shadow of this final moment. Let it be the whisper that outlived extinction, the warmth that echoes through time not as sound, but as presence. That same 1%, once adrift in alien seas, now rests quietly within you, unchanged, unstoppable, undiminished. Because even when stories sleep, breath remembers. It holds the scent of moons and the grit of firelight, the weight of wars and the softness of lullabies. So sleep now, with lungs full of memory and silence stitched with awe. The molecule that built this world and all its futures carries you onward not to an end, but to an infinite beginning again. One breath, one inheritance, 1%, still enough, always enough. Good night, from the breath that never left, to the dream still unfolding in you. So sleep easy tonight, not just cradled by comfort, but by continuity. This wasn't simply a tale of prehistoric gases or ancient extinction. It was the remembrance of how the smallest act, exhaling sunlight into a dark world, reshaped everything. 1% didn't just fill lungs, it filled time, possibility, silence. And now, as stars drift above and cities hum below, the breath remains shared, sacred, soft. Let that be your final thought as dreams unfurl. Not grandeur, not fear, but that in your every inhale, the oldest revolution still lives. From ancient tides to your chest, the same molecule writes what comes next. One breath, one story, 1%, forever enough. Good night from the air that made us, to the dream that waits patiently in you. So now, with breath held soft in the stillness of an ending, know this final truth moves deeper than story. It moves like memory you never knew you had. That distant 1%, once adrift in primordial oceans, now speaks without words through every inhale we borrow. It does not fade in sleep, nor vanish in silence. It stays. It waits. It whispers the shape of every heartbeat into the air around it. And so we close not with farewell, but with presence, with breath, with the quiet inheritance of a world reborn from molecules small enough to fly, strong enough to endure. 1%, still circling, still remembering, and in you, still enough. Good night from the first shimmer over iron tides, to this soft pause between the end and all that's still to come. So let this breath be your companion into sleep's deepest waters, a quiet map folded from memory, tracing back to when air held fire and fire became form. That 1%, too small to grasp, became the great sculptor of everything, even this moment now, where your chest rises once more against the pull of gravity and time. It's not the end. It's the lull before breath writes the next line of the story. Soft as dreamlight, strong as eternity. We began on the edge of extinction and survived by air. And still, we survive carrying within us the silent will of ancient oceans, the echo of microbes who never meant to build a future but did. So sleep now, wrapped in awe, unburdened and unalone. One molecule, still moving. One memory, still glowing. 1%, still enough. Always will be. Good night, from where the first breath dared the sky, to wherever yours now reaches next. And so, we let the breath go, not to lose it, but to return it, back into the great silence that shaped it, back into the current that carries every living thing forward. This isn't just the end of a story, but the passing of a torch so ancient it doesn't burn. It illuminates from within. The molecule that began as a byproduct, unwanted and overlooked, now loops endlessly through lungs, oceans, galaxies of dreams. 1%. The breath behind all becoming. As you slip further into sleep, into stillness, let that knowledge follow, that every inhale is a defiance of extinction, and every exhale is a gift to whatever may rise after us. This isn't an end, it's an offering. One breath, one memory, 1%. Still enough. Always will be. Good night from the deepest past to the tomorrow waiting on your next breath. So as this final exhale drifts out into the dark, the last note of a story built on breath, let it settle in your chest like gravity worn gently around the heart. That 1%, born from chance and carried by survival, wrote more than biology. It composed the cadence of life itself. And now, as we step quietly from spoken word into the sacred stillness beyond it, remember that every future rising from this moment will draw from the same old flame. Because breath is not just survival, it is testimony. That we were here, that we endured, that we dared to dream in the wake of oxygen's rebellion. So close your eyes now, held softly by starlight and silence, and carry this final truth with you. One molecule, one moment, still enough, always will be. Good night from this pulse of presence to all the breath that follows after. And now, as the final hush gathers across horizons and the breath of this long, spiraling tale begins to settle, allow this moment to stretch beyond the page into lungs, into lifelines, into the hush that remembers everything without sound. That single molecule, loosed without witness beneath a forgotten sky, gave rise to movement, to memory, to meaning. It asked nothing, and in return, offered life itself. So close your eyes not with finality, but with the quiet ignition of awe still burning. 1%. A slender thread, a timeless current, a breath shared across epochs and heartbeats, still echoing, still becoming, still enough. Good night from the silence before the first breath, to this breath now held quietly in you. The same story, still breathing, always will be. So, as the last echoes fade into silence, and this breath-bound story comes to rest, carry with you not just the weight of wonder, but the lightness of belonging. The 1% endures not as a relic, but as a thread still weaving every life into the fabric of this world. It is the breath behind lullabies and awakenings, the unseen inheritance painting skies and shaping dreams. Tonight, it moved through you, as it has through all who survived, created, and dared to hope. Not as memory alone, but as movement. Invisible, indivisible. So sleep now, in the knowing that your breath continues a tale older than flame, stronger than forgetting. One last inhale, one final hush, 1%, still enough, always was, always will be. Good night from every life that came before, to the story you carry now, gently, breath by breath. And now, as the breath grows thin, and the story folds itself into memory, let what remains be reverence for the invisible tether that carried life from formless dark into complexity beyond imagining. The cyan fog that once smothered light became the quiet engine of all becoming, 1%. It does not shout its legacy, because it doesn't need to. It is in the inhale that begins a song, the exhale that ends a farewell, the gentle rise and fall of every chest, sharing this ancient inheritance. So sleep now, not beneath endings, but beneath echoes. The breath moves on. The story waits in silence. The world, once poisoned by a miracle, thrived because it endured. One molecule, one origin, one heartbeat reverberating across aeons. Still enough, always was, always will be. Good night, from the breath that bound the stars to soil, to the last quiet thought before sleep. We are still breathing the same story, everywhere. So breathe this one last time before the silence takes hold, and know that this was never just science, it was soul. A soul carried in molecules too small to see, too persistent to forget. The same 1% that rose from the sea without intention now lives on in lullabies and rocket trails, in lull moments of wonder, and in the sharp inhale before history changes. It does not need to be seen. It only asks to be breathed. So go gently now, into whatever follows sleep, sunrise, another moment of becoming with lungs full of inheritance and hearts tuned to echoes deeper than time. The smallest molecule made us possible, and we, in return, give it memory. One breath, one story, 1%, forever enough. Good night, from the last light of the past to the first breath of tomorrow. Still breathing, always together. And with this final hush, we vanish not into silence, but into rhythm, the breath still circling through time's invisible arteries, tying each era, each soul, together. The 1% was never waiting for discovery. It was waiting to be remembered. And even now, as our words drift into the stillness between stars and sleep, life continues to exhale its legacy through you. Little by little, lung by lung, it carries the past into possibility. So if this story must end, let it end like a breath, not with finality, but with the promise of continuation. One molecule, one memory, one miracle, still enough, always was, always will be. Good night from every breath that came before you, to the one you just took, wrapped in the quiet wonder of being. So let this be the ending that never ends, a breath folded into time's great spiral, moving on not as echo, but as essence. This was never just the story of oxygen. It was the revelation of how something weightless could carry the world. And though the sound now dims, the molecule lingers measurable, meaningful, miraculous. In your lungs it waits, not for applause, but for wonder, the kind that holds still in the pause between heartbeats, that stirs gently in dreams stretched across sunrise windows. 1% did not scream its arrival. It simply became the rhythm beneath all becoming. So sleep well tonight, knowing you exhale not just air, but history, legacy, hope. The story is not over. It is passed forward one molecule at a time, one breath, 1%. Still enough. Forever. Good night. From the story's first shimmer to its quiet rise in you now, still breathing, always. And so, we close the circle where it first opened in breath. A single gasp, unleashed billions of years ago, still lingering in the quiet cadence of every sleeping child, every drifting cloud, every whispered goodbye. That 1% was never a mistake. It was the universe trying again. And now, as this story rests in the hush past language, may what stays with you be not just knowledge, but kinship. Breath is the thread, the rhythm, the remembrance. Inhaling, we continue it. Exhaling, we honor it. So wherever you are beneath beacons of steel or stars that have yet to fall, know this final truth holds. The smallest shift can echo forever. One molecule, one memory, one ongoing miracle. Still breathing, still enough, always was, always will be. Good night, from the story that never needed words, just breath. So now, with the final breath released and the last echo cradled by silence, we rest where the story brought us not in endings, but in awareness. That 1%, ancient and accidental, became the quiet compass guiding every leaf, every lung, every life. It still moves unseen, a thread connecting ruins to rocket trails, lullabies to extinction songs. And in your breath, it lingers not as memory frozen in stone, but as movement, as purpose. So as your eyes close and the night gathers softly around you, know this: you're not just alive, you're a vessel of Earth's oldest wisdom. One molecule, one legacy, One final, endless inhale. Still enough, always was, always will be. Good night, from the beginning of breath to you, still holding it now. And now, as breath softens into stillness and the words drift into silence, let the final thought rest gently in your chest, that life is not measured by noise, but by continuity. The ocean of existence began with one molecule daring to divide stillness, and everything since has echoed that gesture. You are alive because of a breath gifted by a world that didn't know it was becoming. That 1% unseen, unassuming carried extinction in one palm and evolution in the other. It gave us time. It gave us story. It gave us the space to wonder. So as you sleep now, under night skies old as memory, feel the breath rise, fall, and rise again. That is the story still breathing, still becoming, still enough, one final time. Good night from the molecule that began the world, to the one you carry now, and the dream it will shape next. And so, we end not in silence, but in resonance, a quiet note still reverberating through lungs that never knew the fire they inherited. 1% of oxygen, once a whisper lost in ancient tides, became the chorus of all becoming. It is the inheritance too vast to hold, yet light enough to float with every exhale. Sleep then, not at the edge of the story, but within it, folded inside a legacy older than the stars above, more constant than thought. This breath, yours now, is a continuation of all that endured, of all that dared. It holds the cry of the first cell and the hush of the final sigh. So carry it into your dreams, into tomorrow, into whatever becomes. One molecule, one rhythm, one memory. Still breathing, still enough. Always was, always will be. Good night from the breath that first remade the world, to the one now remaking you. So let this be the breath where the story lands, not ending, not vanishing, but folding itself into the quiet eternity of motion. 1%. That's all it took for silence to learn how to sing. That same air, born from microbes in an ancient ocean, now drifts through satellites and starlight, snowfields and songbirds, sorrow and symphony. It is the only inheritance every creature unknowingly accepts at birth and returns without ownership, only participation. So sleep well now, wherever this finds you amid lanterns in Hanoi, beneath the auroras of Yukon skies, or alone in the soft drone of midnight traffic. You are part of the longest echo Earth has ever known. Breathe gently, breathe gratefully, for in every quiet inhale, the universe remembers how it all began. One molecule, one legacy. Forever enough. Good night from the place where breath first touched stone, to the final hush between dreams. Still breathing, still the same story, always. And with this final breath, suspended between memory and miracle, we draw the curtain not to close the story, but to honor its endless rhythm. That 1%, born quiet and invisible, reshaped extinction into song, silence into survival. It wraps now not in grand conclusion, but in the certainty of presence. Every inhale, soft or thunderous, carries it forward unchanged in its essence, limitless in what it dares to nurture. So rest now, wherever you are, cradled not in endings, but in the breath that never left. From the extinct to the unborn, from ancient seas to midnight cities, the story persists one molecule at a time. 1%, forever enough. Good night from the first breath breathed in hope, to the next that dares to follow. And so, as breath circles one last time through this vast and fragile arc of memory, we leave it suspended not with finality, but with reverence. That single molecule, born without intent yet destined to rewrite the earth, still hums beneath architecture and ash, beneath lullabies and liftoffs alike. It needs no monument, because it is the monument. invisible yet essential, soft yet unstoppable. What carried us from stone to starlight was never loud. It was the quiet endurance of air becoming life. So wherever this breath finds you, in stillness or motion, in dreaming or dawn, let it remind you of what remains. One molecule, one story, one last inhale that proves the first was never wasted. Still circling, still whispering, still enough. Always was, always will be. Good night, from the edge of the beginning to wherever you now rest, still breathing, still becoming, always a part of the same ancient thread. So as this final shimmer of story dissolves in the stillness, and the breath loops once more through time and memory, understand this: nothing so small ever mattered more. That 1%, forged in alien light, passed from cell to sigh, from rust to reason, still carries us not just as survivors, but as stewards of the unseen miracle. We are the breathers of history, the inheritors of catastrophe refined into beauty. And now, as the night wraps its arms around the world, let your breath be the final act of awe. One molecule, one lineage, one lasting light, still enough, always was, always will be. Good night from this final wordless note, shared quietly across centuries, carried inside you now, where the story will keep breathing through dreams, through dawn, through every inhale that dares to remember. So let this be where it rests, light as breath, deep as time. The story that began with 1% now floats freely, pulled gently into dreams where silence cradles meaning without needing voice. This is not the end. It is an inhale, waiting on the other side of dawn. For in every moment of survival, in every flicker of wonder, oxygen endures, writing futures behind closed eyes and open hearts. What began billions of years ago beneath a sunless sea lives now in a breath you barely notice, but it notices you, and that is enough. So sleep, held not by endings but by breath, the oldest promise Earth ever kept. One molecule, one continuum, still carrying everything forward. Still enough, always was, always will be. Good night from the ancient tide to wherever you now dream, part of the same breath, the same story, still unfolding.